Brother Ruckman, is there a prophetic significance in the revival of the unicorn and the rainbow that we see in all the Christian bookstores and that our kids are being plied with?
About the unicorn and the rainbow, first of all, get Psalm 22, one hand, and then get Genesis chapter 8, the other hand, and then with your third hand, pick up Revelation chapter 10. Now, the significance of this, first of all, in the rainbow is a sign of two things. First of all, it's a sign of peace on earth and God's covenant to bring peace on earth. And because of this, it's a picture of the second coming of Christ to bring peace on earth. In Genesis chapter 9, verse 13. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. We call it a rainbow. In the Bible, it's just called a bow. And it's called a bow because it's half. See, it goes like that. It's like a bow that you shoot. Like a bent bow, like that. That bow doesn't appear completely till you get to heaven. When you get to heaven, John said he saw a rainbow round about the throne. So up in heaven, that rainbow is a circle. If you want to see that, you see it best in a plane. If you'll find a plane about 22,000 feet and look down the cloud below you, you'll see the shadow of the plane going across the cloud, and there's a rainbow around the plane. And it's a complete circle. And there's a beautiful spiritual application there, and you'll understand it better by and by. You only see half of it down here. You see the rest up there. That's the spiritual application. All right, Revelation chapter 10. Now this thing here takes place right at the end of the tribulation. Revelation 10:1. I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. It matches the description of Christ in Revelation 1. And he cried with a loud voice as a lion roars, 3, like Christ. And he takes possession of the land and the sea, verse 2 and 3. And that's a preview of the second advent of Christ. So it's a picture of Christ coming back and bringing peace on earth and God settling the thing with man. Now the trouble with it, as you see it now showing up, is, of course, it's a counterfeit. Everything right now is a counterfeit of something that's going to take place later on. Whether you ever thought it or not, but all the false doctrine taught on this earth is the truth misplaced. Here's a Jehovah's Witness, 144,000 saved. That's right, but not now in the tribulation. Here's a Seventh-day Adventist. You're supposed to keep the seventh day holy. That's true, but not now in the millennium. So all this stuff is misplaced. Now that rainbow is misplaced. The rainbow right now, as it's showing up, is a picture of a one-world religion of humanism that's going on. And it's a sign of that one humanistic religion, which is connected with Satan and some things. And I've forgotten the names of all the people connected with it, although I've read several books on it. And that thing is being promoted in all the news media. And that rainbow will pop up more and more. It'll pop up on television. It'll pop up on advertisements. It'll pop up on everything. But of course, when they use it, they're talking about the bringing in of humanism under man as a god, and that'll be the Antichrist. The world never could get it right. Psalm 22. Now the unicorn's mentioned here in verse 21. And I'm beginning at verse 20, and this is Christ on the cross. Psalm 22 is Christ on the cross. Notice 22:1. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? See, it's Christ on the cross. Now, with any doubt in your mind about it, look at verse 17. I may tell all my bones. None of the bones are broken. They part my garments among them and cast lots upon my vesture. It's Christ. And Christ on the cross mentions all these animals. For example, in verse 12, bulls of Bashan, he says. Then he says in verse 20, the power of the dog. Then he says in 21, the lion's mouth. Then he says in 21, save me from the lion's mouth, thou hast heard me from the horns of the unicorns. Unicorns, plural. The classic unicorn is a horse with one horn in the middle of his head. And that's what appears in all the drawings, the medieval manuscripts and scrolls. And the problem comes up, how come we never see one, or where are they, and this and that? Let's take one more reference, and we'll try to get this stuff together. Numbers. Back to Numbers. Here's a prophecy on the strength of Israel, given by Balaam. Numbers 24, verse 7. Now this is Balaam prophesying to Balak about the future of Israel. He says this, 24:7, he shall pour the water out of his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters, and his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brought him forth out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of an unicorn. Or now the uni is one. That's what that is. The unicorn, as an animal, isn't located. There's an animal it can be. It can very well be a rhinoceros. Somebody says he has two horns. Yeah, he's got one big one sticking up there. Talk about the strength of a unicorn, that could be it. But the classic picture is a horse with a horn right in the middle of his forehead. There is such a thing as a real unicorn, but a real unicorn is a goat. There are goats that have been born with one horn out the head. I've got photographs of them. And in Daniel chapter 8, when Daniel has that vision, he dreams of a he-goat with a notable horn between his eyes. So technically there is such a thing as a unicorn, but it's a goat with one horn. That may be the reference in all these passages. Turn to Proverbs and I'll show you why. Proverbs chapter 30. Proverbs chapter 30. Proverbs chapter 30, verse 29. Proverbs 30:29. There be three things which go well, yea, four, calmly and going. A lion, which is strongest among beasts, and turneth not away from any. A greyhound, and he-goat also. And a king against whom there is no rising up. Now that he-goat there in Proverbs is mentioned in Daniel as a he-goat, and Daniel, that big horn between his thing there is the first king, and that first king is Alexander the Great, one of the greatest types of Antichrist in the Bible. So there's somewhere there the unicorn represents a one-horned goat, a one-horned horse, or a rhinoceros, and represents a picture of the Antichrist as far as power goes. Now the last possibility is this. Well, there are two other possibilities. The first possibility is there exists up in heaven unicorns. When old Elisha sees Elijah caught up in the chariots, he says, my father, the chariots of Israel and the horsemen thereof. And Elijah's caught up in a whirlwind of chariots of fire, horse of fire. Elisha says to the Lord, open the young man's eyes that he may see. And he opens his eyes and sees the mountains about covered with horses and chariots of fire. When you come back at the second advent of Jesus Christ, Revelation chapter 19, you come back on horses. But they're not physical horses. They're pure energy. They're fire. They're fire. And those things are called horses. Now, who knows whether they got a spike in the head or not? Nobody's ever seen it. Nobody knows. Maybe they do. One other possibility. The other possibility is that once upon a time on the earth, these things lived, and the remnant of those things is in the literature. That's why they mention them, but they became extinct at the time of the flood or thereafter. Now, a fellow tends to turn up his nose at interpretation, then he ought to go to school and study biology and see some really funny creatures. You study biology and see these animals they think lived one time, and you can see how a unicorn could have been there just as quick as Stegosaurus or Triceratops or Brontosaurus or Pterodactyl, all that Donald Duck stuff. Those are just pictures they got in the book. They said all these things live. Well, let me tell you something. If those Stegosaurus and Brontosaurus and Pterodactyl and all that bunch could have lived, believe me, you sure could have had a horse with one horn on it. So the answer is they probably were there, but they're extinct, and they're a type of the Antichrist, and they may be type of real horses, and the real horses up in glory. So the constant repetition, that rainbow theme and that unicorn, is, for us, it's a picture that the second coming of Christ is right at the door. For the world, it's getting them ready for the Antichrist. Something else. Nothing like a Bible to clear up a college education.